It's a pleasure to be with you all today, and we want to recognize and thank Viva for your amazing collaboration from the very beginning. I remember some of the very first calls planning the Hope Groups was with the Viva team, so it's always a pleasure to be with you. If you could open the slides, please, that would be great. My name is Nicole Baldonado, and I am the program coordinator for Hope Groups with World Without Orphans. But we work with a collaboration across many different organizations and academics and international and local nonprofit organizations. I'm very pleased to represent an amazing panel of speakers today. I think some of you may have either already heard from Dr. Susan Hillis, or you may be hearing from her in the coming days. But she is part of the steering part of this team. And then my other colleagues will introduce themselves as they begin speaking today. Next slide, please. We have the honor in the Hope Groups team of working in areas where we see intense crises all over the world, but where we have the ability to bring hope and strengthening to families and to children in these places. We all are aware and see that we are increasingly facing throughout the world compound crises in the forms of extreme climate events through things like droughts, floods, storms, also contagion-related crises with regards to outbreaks of disease due to viruses, but also due to drugs, suicide, and violence. And then additionally, we see crises that are as a result of conflict, whether domestic conflict, international wars, or civil violence within countries. Next slide, please. And what we find is that in this compound crises, in these situations where families are facing these different types of crises all at one time, the intersecting crises really do compromise the caregivers and the families themselves with increased substance abuse and mental health disorders. And this leads to family risk pathways where we see increased death and illness among caregivers themselves. We also see that there is increased poverty and food insecurity in these areas that affect the families. And then, of course, we see migration and forced displacement, especially in situations of war and disaster where people are forced to become refugees, as Phil mentioned in the situation with Ukraine and Russia. And then also any of these types of crises often create a disruption in basic services. That could be in healthcare services, legal services, education, mental health care. And as a result of these increased pathways, risk pathways, we see that the risks to children and adolescents also increase in the areas of violence and sexual violence against children, early pregnancy and marriage, HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, mental health disorders, loss of family care, children having to live in orphanages or on the streets, and then, of course, loss of education. So these are all of the disturbing news and what we see happening. But the good news is that there is so much we can do together to really impact these families and their children with hope and with strengthening. Next slide, please. So what we're learning is that there is a potential minimum package of family strengthening together with basic resources to help meet the needs of families that are facing these types of compound crises. And we're going to look at just one of those options today in the Hope Groups program. Next slide, please. Some of you may be familiar with the Inspire package, which is a list of 7 proven strategies that are recommended throughout the world by the World Health Organization, the CDC, and many other organizations to prevent violence against children. And you can see here on the slide, there are 7 specific strategies related to prevention of violence. And the Inspire package shows us how we can really impact children's lives throughout the world through specific programs that implement these 7 strategies. And the one we're going to talk about today is the Hope Groups, which does employ 5 of these 7 strategies. Next slide, please. From a Christian perspective, as we all come from a background of wanting to collaborate across local churches to impact families and to strengthen families, you can see the verse at the top of the slide here. We really take this as the philosophy behind the Hope Groups, which is when we are meeting these very practical needs of people, including children, we are doing so as unto Christ and as a form of sharing God's love with the people around us. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what the Hope Groups are and why they work. First of all, they do use the world's best evidence for strengthening hope for mental health and resilience and prevention of violence against children. These tools come from Parenting for Lifelong Health and emergency mental health strategies that are recognized as evidence-based and effective. An important aspect of the Hope Group's effectiveness is that we are very dedicated to co-creation and co-evaluation anywhere that we go. That started with Ukraine, which we'll hear about in a few moments, but in every context where we have worked since then, we are dedicated to working with the local leadership to make this a truly homegrown type of program. We set the program up to be led by trained peer facilitators so that it does not require it does not require mental health care professionals or social workers or faith leaders. It can be peer facilitators, not requiring further burdening of already overburdened mental health care systems in crisis. We've used flexible formats for in-person and online delivery of the program. We also use expert resources for adaptation so that we can contextualize in every context where we go. We're able to create a culturally resonant form of the curriculum that maintains the evidence base but truly does feel locally led. We do provide expert training and implementation support on the program, and we include a model for supporting facilitators, recognizing that this work is so challenging, especially on the ground, and wanting to make sure that we're taking care of the people who are supporting their participants. Next slide, please. So the Hope Groups began as psychosocial and mental health and parenting and crisis support groups for Ukrainians impacted by war and displacement as a result of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. It began when trauma-informed experts from Ukraine and from other countries listened to the felt needs of Ukrainian refugee women in Poland at a camp. Together, we co-created and piloted what is now a 12-session Hope Group program, which has continued to be led in Ukraine by a consortium of local and international organizations, including WWO, which is World Without Orphans, Ukraine Without Orphans, Nehemiah in Ukraine, Children Mission, and an organization called There Is Hope. You'll have the honor of hearing from the executive director of Children's Mission today. These groups help parents and caregivers and their children heal from trauma, strengthen the relationships within their family in the midst of crisis, and promote learning to reduce violence against children and women. To date, we have been able to work with more than 3,500 Ukrainian parents in 13 different countries. And then you'll hear more about other contexts where we've moved since Ukraine. Next slide, please. Here you can see the topics that thank you. The topics that we cover in the 12 sessions. The first 2 sessions really focus on mental health care strategies and basic health strategies for parents and caregivers themselves. So what we often find is that parenting programs focus on helping parents develop parenting skills, but they don't necessarily focus primarily on the parents and their own mental health and well-being. So we recognize that especially in crisis scenarios, it's very important to support the well-being of parents so that they in turn can support their children. So the first 2 sessions, we focus strictly on the parents themselves, the caregivers, and how they can develop healthy habits for their daily lives, but also grounding techniques and strategies for responding in times of acute stress and trauma. Sessions 3 and 4, we talk about how to talk with our children about crisis, how to answer the difficult questions they have, how to build strong relationships within the family unit, even amidst crisis. In session 5, we cover safety on the move. So this is especially important for families who are actively evacuating a situation or in active displacement. And then in session 6, we start talking about things like managing difficult emotions like anger, for example, and being able to start looking at how we can prevent violence against children in their own families, in their own homes. In session 7, we talk about grief and loss, both for parents and for their children. And then session 8, we talk about secondary trauma and survivor guilt, which are very common themes in crisis, and how we can respond to those in healthy ways. Session 9, we talk about how to support children's learning, even amidst crisis scenarios where education systems are usually disrupted. 10 and 11, we talk about healthy relationships between parents or partners and how to help our children, especially as they are growing older, learn how to develop healthy, respectful relationships. And then in the end, we talk about resilience and kind of wrapping all of the topics up to help them have a good foundation for moving forward. Next slide, please. So before I turn it over to our Ukrainian speaker, I just want to share that our collaborative, which is represented by Viva and World Without Orphans, World Relief, and a number of other organizations, we do provide free open source Hope Groups materials on the World Without Orphans website. We also offer expert training of trainers, implementation consulting, and we have the option of adapting to adaptation consulting for your local context. You can see on the side here of the slide, we have the different books that are representative of different contexts where the Hope Groups have been implemented, which you will hear about today. We also provide evaluation support through pre-developed surveys, and then sustainability and scaling support and planning. We are planning to have a virtual training sometime this fall. So if you're interested in that, please do scan this QR code and fill out the survey, and we will keep you posted on information about that. Next slide, please. I'd like to now turn it over to my colleague Ludmila Brin from Children Mission to share about Ukraine and the Hope Groups there. Thank you, Luda.
Hello, dear friends. My name is Ludmila Brin, and I am currently, and I have always lived here in Ukraine, and I'm speaking to you from Kyiv. Next slide, please. And I will tell you more, probably stories about how it all started and how it impacted so many Ukrainians. As you probably know, that the vivid tension between Russia and Ukraine began back in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea by Russia and has since evolved into a full-scale war. So that invasion back from the 22nd of February marked a significant escalation, and that led to widespread violence, destruction, and it has been claimed as the biggest humanitarian catastrophe since the Second World War. According to United Nations data, as you can see on the screen, that we are talking about 3.7 million internally displaced people in Ukraine. Also talking about almost 7 million refugees from Ukraine to other countries, mainly, of course, to Europe. Poland and Germany still remaining the biggest recipients of Ukrainian refugees. And the United Nations still states that about almost 13 million people need humanitarian assistance, including nearly 2 million children. And obviously, when we are talking about millions, we understand it's an immense catastrophe, but I want to make it more personal and tell you a little bit of my story. And my story is that I woke up on that first morning in February 2022 in my bed in Kiev, and I realized the war has started, but every 24 hours and then the next 24 hours showed to me that even though I don't have children to save from bombs and shelling, but I need to rescue myself somehow because the Russian troops were already standing almost like 15 kilometers only from the building where I lived. So I fled Kiev and also became um, internally displaced person, and I went to Western Ukraine. And even though I was quite a trauma-informed person by that time, because Children Mission is a training organization, and we've been doing trauma care training for 10 years before the start of this war. But I still felt that I was very, very lost and didn't know what to do. So I realized that to keep myself on and to keep my team on, we need to talk a lot what is happening. So that was very important, and the secret that I learned on the very first days of this war. So later, on one of such Zoom calls, I met Susan Hillis, a professor that we mentioned already, and she invited me to join her to Krakow in Poland to talk to Ukrainian ladies at the refugee camp. And the refugee camp didn't look like a camp. It was a fancy hotel, but the women with children we met there, we saw that all of them are lost because they lost their normal life, and they also had no picture of their future. And almost every person we sat with was they were like crying, "Listen to me." And so that's how the hope groups were born. Please, next slide. So the main thing of hope groups is actually that this is a safe space for sharing experience of war displacement. It's um, safe space for educating these participants about trauma, and also that in this situation of trauma, people need very practical coping strategies. And what it actually, the strong point is that in a group and a group discussion, the person feels I'm not alone. So it reduces isolation, promotes community, and people can support each other not only inside the group setting, but also outside of these meetings. And obviously, most of refugees were moms with children, young and teenagers, so they need to kind of not to be trained in parenting skills, but some of them just needed to be reminded, because in the situation of trauma, you often kind of lose whatever you learned or was have been able to do before. So that's why this whole idea and the program that we first had only 4 lessons, 4 meetings, and then developed it into the 12, as Nicole told you. So all of this help a lot. So please, next slide. So by this time, here in Ukraine, we have more than 100 trained facilitators. We have a very big experience of leading hope groups offline and online. Why? Because people, for safety reasons, some people cannot meet offline, so they join online. And in such a way, we can get different people from different settings and support them. So more than 3,500 Ukrainian participants are already trained and done this course. So the Hope group, actually, what we are talking about, it grew into the whole movement, because for us, hope is not just an abstract notion, but hope is very practical. When a person starts to understand his or her emotions, when a person starts to make sense of what is happening, and also when a person get hold of his or her life back, takes practical steps in applying all the coping strategies. So really, that's when the hope is restored in the hearts of people, and that's why hope groups are very effective. So what we can see after 3 years of the war, can you please show the next slide? So we are now actually moving from the idea that hope groups is for people on the move to the hope groups are for people who needs to build up resilience. Now we are talking about that we want to have a special adaptation of materials of hope groups for families of our soldiers, also for teenagers. Then we see that it will work very well for foster parents. And we also see that churches can become resilient centers, providing mental health and using these hope groups materials as an outreach to their communities. So it's a very powerful tool, and I'm glad that it's working not only for Ukrainians.
Thank you so much, Luda. I love you said a hope movement. That's the first time I've heard that. It's beautiful. Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you. Andres, I would love to invite you to start and share about Colombian hope groups.
Thank you, and thank you, Ludmila, for contextualizing this whole movement. I believe Colombia is the first country to have done this beyond Ukraine, and the adaptation of what we did in Colombia comes through different contexts and different reasons. As it was mentioned, we have adapted it culturally, but introduced some modifications while at the same time preserving the main core of the message and the evidence that the Hope Group provides. So I'm going to tell you a little bit this story from Colombia in a few minutes. Next slide, please. The context in Colombia is somewhat different. Colombia has experienced for the last 50 to 60 years an internal conflict that has led to a sort of protracted type of existence of internally spots of violence that have affected populations and that have led to many millions of people being displaced over the years. It is right now probably the third country that has the most internally displaced population in the world because of that conflict. But beyond that, one of the reasons we decided to implement this program in Colombia came off or right after the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. In some work that we were doing with other colleagues, we documented the fact that Colombia, with several other countries, had experienced a considerable amount of death of caregivers, and that had left a very large amount of children without the proper care of those caregivers. So there's a combination of causes. The conflict, there is a context of high income inequality, so there's poverty in some regions. There is COVID-19 that occurred, and all of these contexts led to, or have led eventually, to a lot of mental health problems in the population that have been recognized. But at the same time, in the socioeconomic conditions of this country, there are experiences of chronic and infectious diseases that affect the mortality of the population. So in context, we wanted to capture all the mortality of caregivers and try to provide some hope for families of those who have experienced some form of loss of caregivers due to any cause, either conflict or infectious disease or chronic disease. One of the adaptations that we wanted to do, and we drew this and we took this from Brazil actually, was that we wanted to identify the families who lost caregivers really early on, by looking at recent deaths of caregivers and trying to implement some type of mechanism that would identify these families in a fast way. So we actually worked with some funerary homes and tried to identify people where families had lost a caregiver, but where children were present. And then we applied this particular intervention to those families. We invited them to participate and applied this intervention face to face with many of these families in the northern regions of Colombia. Let's go to the next slide. So there are insufficient services. There is all this context that I have mentioned, and there's a great need from the population to get some type of support. That support that Dunmira was mentioning, that provides hope, that provides some answers, that creates some response and gives people some strength, is really, really important. And there was some willingness from local and departmental authorities in the northern part of the country to actually participate in collaboration with a university that we were working on. In addition to that, we had a few years before had been working for several years on surveys that documented violence against children, where we identify a very high prevalence of that, and worked with the government to create a national action plan to prevent violence against children. Amongst the priorities that the plan identified, which is based on Inspire, that Nicole mentioned, were parenting interventions, norms and value changes, and support for education and life skills. So these three elements, which are the core elements of that plan, match really nicely to what the Hope Groups provides. And so we had really good technical capacity from the university, so we adapted it in country. Next slide, please. So we conducted a slightly shorter, not 12 sessions, we had 8 sessions. We focused more on resilience, on communication within families, adapted it to the Spanish language, did an initial pilot with 150 families in 4 municipalities in the northwestern part of the country near the Caribbean coast. And we had both facilitators and participants give us some inputs to try to understand what had happened. We did an initial evaluation before and after the intervention, and we found the results that you see there. We found a considerable amount of reduction in depression amongst the caregivers, a reduction of problematic child behavior issues, of problems related to emotional violence and physical violence, and at the same time, a better communication between caregivers and their children, and better understanding of the situation that children were experiencing. And amongst the caregivers we never thought that children also experience grief. They never express their feelings. They simply misbehave. So the caregivers are given that understanding and provided with elements and tools to actually provide some support to the children. And the children who participated really enjoyed some of the exercises that soothed them, that gave them some peace and tranquility. And so they were also very thankful for this type of intervention. Next slide, please. So this project has actually led us to think more about how to adapt it in other contexts and expand it within the country. One of the things we wanted to do was to link it to services in the country. We want to expand it to larger urban settings. This is a small, medium-sized urban population that we've approached, and we have worked on 4 smaller municipalities. But we also want to work on schools and try to build that resilience that was spoken to before, and build that strength amongst families and identifying youth who are experiencing some type of grief or loss or need some of that help within the schools, and connect that activity with schools, with activities, and with the parents. And this is very much in line with Inspire. There's solid evidence that parenting in schools and involving youth, schools, and communities and families is very effective. The intervention is therefore really versatile and adaptable, not only to a very different geographic and cultural setting, such as Colombia compared to Ukraine, but also in the format that it's giving. So it's really important and has also been very satisfying to actually see that the benefits that we have documented for Colombia are actually quite similar to the benefits that have been documented thus far for Ukraine. So there's a very good opportunity to scale this up, to replicate it in many areas, and I'm sure we'll see more examples of that. The next slide. I believe that was it. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andres. Pastor Lidlal, we would love to hear from you on the Hope Groups in Manipur, India.
Good afternoon. I'd like to say, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Lord Jesus and Viva and Hope Group for the opportunity you have given me to share about the Hope Group, what the Hope Group is doing in Manipur. Next slide, please.
Sorry, is anyone else having problems hearing, or is it just me?
I can hear fine.
Oh, okay. It's just me then.
Manipur is in the northeastern part of India, border with Myanmar. If you see the map of India, northeastern border with Myanmar, China, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and there are two tribes of people. The Meitei are the Hindu, and the Kuki-Jaws community are the Christians. 3rd May, there was an ethnic conflict, and here is more than 270 people died, and more than 6,000 houses are burned, and around 70,000 people are displaced, especially among the Christian community. And many churches and places of worship has been targeted, depending the crisis for us because we belong to Christians. While this problem was going on, I am based in Delhi. I'm a pastor for the last 22 years. I am based in Delhi. And we have been helping the displaced people financially or for their day-to-days, what they need. But after a few months, nearly 1 year, as me and my team were praying, then we have decided that I think we need to think for the longer term. So in the meantime, I got one of my friends told me about World Without Orphan meeting in Chiang Mai. So I have never been to the World Without Orphan before. I have never heard about it. So I came down to Chiang Mai and I have met Gary, Anu, and they are the architect of helping me to start a Hope Group Manipur. So after that, I will come to know Nicole, and Nicole is the one who is helping us. And as we started discussing, as we started talking, and Nicole just narrate about the 12 parenting tips. And as we translate into our own language, then so many thoughts came into my mind, tears in my mind. And this is the right group we need to introduce, especially among the women and the children who are suffering a lot. Even now, if you go to that part of the world, they are still in the relief centers. And that is the hill area, mountain area, full of, especially these days, full of rains, and they are struggling. But then I thought that this parenting tips is going to help. So next slide, please. Then we coordinate with Nicole and Gary. They are the one who really helped me. Then I have to go in the month of December, this what we started, Hope Group Manipur. And I know that through the Hope Group Manipur, we have trained around 20 people. And if God's will, after a few weeks, we are going to complete the translation into our own Kuki dialect. So here's why hope groups are relevant to our crisis, because I see from the parenting tips and other things, emotional, spiritual, psychological support we are going to give to these people who are in IDPs or those in the relief centers. Not only that, hope and comfort to those who lost their homes, loved one, and sense of security. Because we are thinking, there is a saying, slow and steady win the race. I think that is the what a hope group we are praying, that we can consistently support our people emotionally, spiritually, and give them the hope and comfort and have fellowship with them. Like the book of First Thessalonians chapter 5, it says, encourage one another, motivate one another, pray for one another, help individuals find strength in community, healing through shared experience and reassurance in God's word, restoring their faith and renew the sense of purpose. And many times we thought that giving money or rice, not that is what that is not only what the people need. The people need the love of Christ. Next slide, please. So these are, now we have trained around 20 people, more than 20 people, and we are going to train it more. And this is how we started. And if God's will, even coming days, after a few weeks, we are going to translate and we are going to train more, not only in Manipur. We have decided with Gary and myself, we have decided to start in Delhi as well. And if God's will, if we are applying for fund, and I hope and believe that God will provide the fund and we can start this hope group in Manipur as well as in Delhi. Next slide, please. And this is our dream, supporting the persecuted, providing a safe space, being a channel of blessing, strengthening through God's word, and restoring hope. And that is our dream for the future of those persecuted Christians in that part of the world. Next slide.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you. Yes.
Thank you
Please
so much.
continue to remember in prayer. The problem is still going on.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Ledlal. It was great to hear from all of you. Next slide, please. Our speaker, our implementer who's our local partner in Jordan, was not able to join us today. We have a video from her, and then Sydney will also share a little bit about the program in Jordan.
Thanks so much, Nicole. So just to share briefly, I wanted to talk about the context in Jordan for Nazreen, our local director who wasn't able to join us. So she's led the Hope Groups in Jerash Camp, which is a camp in Jordan for Palestinians, most of whom have been there for generations. And when we did our initial surveys at the start of Hope Groups, we found that people were facing immense needs. We found that 85% of parents were depressed. 60% reported that they felt they would be better off dead. 82% of children had been emotionally abused. 55% of children were depressed, and 30% of children expressed that they wished that they were dead. So we were shocked and deeply concerned. And Nazreen, who really led the Hope Groups in Jordan, wrote this definition at the bottom where she said, in the midst of these incredible difficulties, Hope Groups created a safe space for healing, learning, connection, emotional strength, tools, and community support, which broke cycles of fear, isolation, abuse, and hopelessness. Next slide, please. I'll just quickly share a few results from our evaluation of Hope Groups in Jordan. Depression and anxiety reduced by 40%. Next slide, please. Violence against children reduced by 45%. Next slide, please. and hopefulness for the future increased by 45%. So even in the midst of incredible pain and suffering, hope groups were able to improve mental health, reduce violence, and increase hopefulness about the future. And if you'll go to the next slide, we have a short video that we'll share that's a testimony from hope groups in Jordan.
والحمد لله استفدت كثير. وأول يوم رمضان اللي خلاني أعرف إني تعافيت، عندي بنت عمرها 5 سنين، لسه بعمل في الفطرة قبل الأذان يمكن بربع ساعة. إجا حصان على الحارة هايج، إجت بنتي تحت الحصان. لما شفت المنظر أنا تذكرت مجموعات الأمل، تذكرت لازم أخذ أكسجين، وكاتبة الله وإن نشوف. فهيك صرت آخذ نفس وأطلع، لما طلعوا بنتي وإنه الحمد لله بسيطة، إصابتها هيك يعني حاجات بسيطة. فما لو إنه قبل كان استفرغت وخفت والأشياء اللي كانت تصير معي.
رغف، بتقدري تحكي لي مين المشاركة بمجموعات الأمل؟ الماما بتقدري تحكي لي عنها شوية؟
كنا مروحة من دورة مجموعة الأمل. ماما بدي والله عندي دراسة وبدي أروح، معلش ما بقدر أعمل هاي الشغلة. بتقول لي خلص ماما أنت روحي اعمل وأنا بعملها. فأنا كنت أحس هاي أمي، لا مستغربة إنه جد هاي أنتي ماما، يعني بقولها هيك. فبتحكي لي أنا من يوم رايح أنا هيك راح يصير أسلوب في الدار.
يعني كيف جو العام؟ تقدري تحكي لي جو البيت كيف صار؟
كثير فرفوش، صار في اشياء وفي نشاطات لاخوان صغار. عندي اخت بالروضه صرت تعمل لها نشاطات بالبيت. ملصقات على الحيطان، يعني صارت اشي جديد.
واو.
Thank you for playing this. You can go on to the next slide.
والحمد لله استفدت كثير.
So for our last 8 minutes, I'm going to focus on the evaluation of hope groups, but I also want to just quickly mention a recent project where we've been trying to see if hope groups content could be delivered digitally through chatbots. So we won't spend much time talking about this today, but I mention it in case any of you are interested in this kind of digital implementation. Our purpose has been that we know more people are needing support than the number of people who can be involved in in-person programming. So we've recently tried a chatbot called Crisis Text with the goal of trying to make sure all parents in crisis can at least receive minimum mental health and parenting support content. You can go on to the next slide, please, which just gives ideas of the pictures of what this looks like, which we won't talk about today, but please feel free to contact us if you're interested in this. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've been talking about hope in crisis, and now as I talk about the evaluation component of this, I'm focusing on how can we invest our lives in what works to build hope, healing, and flourishing throughout the earth. Next slide, please. So as we've said today, and as of all of you likely already know, the number of families and children affected by crisis is big and it's growing fast, but we really believe that together the church can make a difference. Next slide, please. So all of you are probably familiar with this verse of well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over little, I will set you over much. And this is really the primary purpose for us and why we evaluate the programs. If you'll go on to the next slide, please. So the number one reason we evaluate is we want to faithfully serve and invest our lives in what we're sure really works to strengthen families. And the second reason that we evaluate is we want to leverage data to advocate for the needs of families. So from every place that we've worked, our surveys have shown us massive needs that exist, which then we can work to try to be sure that we meet. So for example, this is data from the camp in Jordan that I mentioned, which is how we knew that there was such a high prevalence of mental health struggles and abuse struggles also. And then the third reason that we evaluate is that it lets us both learn about the effectiveness of programs to be sure that they work, but also increase funding to be sure that these effective programs can be used widely. So I have this quote from a Sudanese colleague of ours, but she said that Sudanese families had been invisible for decades, but through data, we could make their needs and programs which effectively meet their needs visible, funded, and scaled. So the heart for us is always being sure that things are effective, using data to advocate for the needs of families, and using data on whether programs are effective to get funding so that programs can be scaled widely to help families who are in need. And if we'll go on to the next slide, please. I just want to mention that for us, in every area that we've worked, we're committed to adapting programs so that they'll be relevant for the context, training local leaders to implement the programs, coaching them throughout the process, evaluating to be sure something is effective, and then advocating for change and advocating for scaling of the program so it can be sustained to help many for years to come. And we've mentioned most of these regions that we've been working, and there are many other regions where we're hoping to begin. So we hope that you'll reach out to us if you're working in these regions where we have ongoing hope groups, or if you're working in these regions where we're planning to begin in the future. Next slide, please. And again, this is just showing the areas where we've worked. And what I want to emphasize here is just that our team has found this is a long process. So there's time for adapting the program to be right for your setting, time for evaluating to make sure that it works. And then we're really committed to fruit that lasts and advocating for sustaining programs to reach millions and all who are in need. And for time, if you'll go on to the next slide, please. I just want to close with saying, for me, what's been really inspirational about being a part of Hope Groups is that in every region where we've worked, we've seen hopefulness in families increase. And all of our amazing panelists have spoken about this in the settings where we've worked. And I put here just data from Colombia and Jordan and Ukraine, where we measured people's hopefulness about the future. And in each of them, we saw hopefulness rising in these regions. And it's my prayer that we'll continue to see hopefulness increasing, even in the midst of suffering and pain and difficulty in these regions and in more regions to come. And we hope to get to join with you for this. Next slide, please. And again, our vision, which I think is the same as probably all of you who are here's vision, is for us to see hope go throughout the world, and children who are at risk in regions throughout the world have resources and support to live thriving, flourishing lives. And we thank you for all that you've done and your work in your different settings. We thank you for joining with us today, and we hope that this is just the beginning of a conversation that will continue on. Last slide, please. So we have contact information here, and I believe we also have some time now for questions. So thank you all so much.